Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Rational Investors recap of our daily brief. And it looks like we're live on YouTube. That's good. So this should be about 10 minutes. But keep in mind, everybody, I am doing this on my own here. So if I kind of mess this up, my apologies, but I'll just try my best here. Okay, so first things first, coming out of the gate this morning, and we sort of talked a little bit about this yesterday, how much of the price action that we saw with various markets on holiday was kind of wonky, maybe a little artificial, and how much of it was actually believable. We see this morning, I've got on this chart right here, all of our sort of risk risk off proxies, fear proxies, worried about the US dollar collapsing proxies, that kind of stuff. And you can see they've all, they're catching bids here this morning. They're all moving in unison. I do like this as a nice sort of correlation study. In essence, we're watching the yen, the gold, Bitcoin, and US treasuries. And they're all doing nicely here this morning. So not a big surprise that Bitcoin has caught a bit of a bid and is moving up because we have various other market proxies that, in my opinion, are all sort of fear proxies all moving up in unison. So having said that, we won't necessarily look into the specific trade setups on things like yen and gold and bonds. But, you know, we have quite an active crypto community here on the site, so we probably ought to take a good look at that. And what I see here on Bitcoin, ironically enough, and this is looking at the 3-month forward contracts over on OKCoin. We can look at the cash market. It's basically the same message, but I thought this illustrated this very well. If we do a fib from the lows back up to the highs, gee whiz. What happened this morning? Good old Ray Burchett, Ray Barbecue 38.2s were tagged nicely. And interesting enough, too, if we look at things like Stamp, the cash market, you'll notice that, in essence, the big fat round number, $10,000, acted as both a magnet and an oscillation point for the market here this morning. So I don't really think that the 10,000 number being hit and traded back to really should have been too big of a surprise to anybody. I also don't think that 38.2s, it's interesting how we just blew through 38.2 heading up. And so I'm sure a lot of people are like, 38.2s, whatever. But I think here's a great illustration of Mr. Burchett's 38.2 level. And what usually should happen here with these market moves is, in essence, a pullback to 38.2 to simply ask whether this up move is actually done or whether this is just nothing more than just a healthy consolidation correction following a very, very powerful move up. And if anything, level oneers just did this. It's kind of hard to see with this candle being a doji right here, but this now creates a fractal formation where, in essence, now we have this key pivot low. If we lose this low going forward, then the market is fractaled out. And we talked last week, or I guess a couple weeks ago, about how the potential for a fractal top came in here. The market said, nope, I don't want to have anything of fractals, and took off to the upside. So we now actually have a framework off of these higher time frame charts to sort of decide whether we're actually still in a bull market or whether the bull is done. And I highly recommend using that 38.2 level for that sort of reference point. As I sort of pointed out in the daily brief, really we could do one of two things. We could end up going sideways, making higher lows and higher highs here, and actually set up a massive continuation pattern which takes us basically to new highs, right? And everybody would love to see that. All the bulls, rah, rah, new highs. But something like just very quickly, AB equals CD takes us all the way up into here, test those old breakout highs. Actually, those old all-time highs. Yeah, it could happen. You never know in this crazy game. Or conversely, we do the 38.2, we M out, and that's it for the bull. And my hunch is if that happens, then we're probably pretty likely to do things like reload zones. This is nothing more than a trading range. And we have to come back down to things like 78.6s. There's Mountain Man off of that previous fractal level, etc. So as it stands right now, encouraging that the slide is halted. And in fact, for all those lower time frame players, and actually I even had it on the chart here, all the lower time frame players, we had a number of short sort of setups. This is the bot setup, AB equals CD, working. And you'll notice that the market came down into move stop to trailing. I think it's probably a good idea at that point. You just look at market structure and move your stop accordingly. And you can see on that counter trend rally this morning, that level was taken out, and in essence, botters should basically walk away with this small profit on the short off of this M top and just let the sort of dust settle. Sort of reiterating, continuing on that thought, that theme, we actually had a really cool example of a double divergence come in on MACD this morning. Off of the lower time frames, you can see market made new lows. MACD did not make new lows, and market actually made new lows here. MACD did not make new lows, and depending on where we finish here today, you can see that the MACD is trying to break out and confirm this massive bull div. So that's another sort of reason, and what we say on the site and what we talked about in the daily brief today is when you see this type of price action, you might be bearish. You might think that, hey, Bitcoin's got to go down and finish these AB equals CDs. That's fine. But the long and short of it here is when you see these bull divs come in, if you are a bear, you're best just to cool your jets. And I think on balance, that makes sense. If we change themes here a little bit, of course, I'm pretty active in the stock market these days. But if we take a look at some of the stock market proxies for crypto, we also see that, things like Overstock, which is sort of a bluer chip name in the crypto space, it actually looks like it's carving out a massive inverted head and shoulders right now. But you can see it's back up pressing against its highs, suggesting that stock market people think that there's still some more upside here. And if we look at some of my little penny dreadfuls, these guys are also pressing higher. This BITK challenging its most recent highs. And then my little IMIN, he went absolutely nutso. Not necessarily failure here yet, but what I did find really interesting about this is you can see that all of these sort of blockchain related stocks all turned in unison, almost all at the exact same time. My hunch is that they're all going to consolidate here. And remember, stocks usually lead commodities. So ironically enough, if the stock guys actually think that we can see new highs and they're pressing these stocks to new highs, then that probably bodes pretty well for the good old Bitcoin. Keeping an eye on things like China. This was another theme of our daily brief today. The bigger Chinese indexes, they've got these bullish bots working. You can see how close they are to moving their stops to scratch. They made new highs here. I don't think that this isn't a trade, of course, that I would be thinking about putting on right now. And I think, had people been hunting longs off of these lows here, if we drill down to lower time frame, you see the W's, etc. I think a test of these highs basically implies that we move our stop to scratch. But I did make reference recently, and I really like the look of this little stock, this NIO, sort of China's Tesla proxy, if you will. It's put in cute little W's. And so if the Chinese stock market is feeling uppy and they're heading into some sort of bull, then my hunch is we're probably going to see this little guy perform. And full disclosure, I did go and buy a little bit of this stock yesterday. All right, finishing off today's daily brief. Of course, don't want to finish on a down note, but shit happens in this crazy world. And here is yet another example of Trex and their monkey games. This coin, it could be completely questionable as to the quality of it. Full disclosure, I take punches in the nose just like everybody else. Very, very small portion of my portfolio, but I think it's just a reoccurring theme with Trex here. Is if your coin is just listed on Trex, that's a major, major warning sign, and maybe you might want to give that some second thought. This is the latest sort of list of coin delistings by Trex, and I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a pain in the butt. But before you go and put on new positions, maybe you might want to ask yourself, is this coin just listed on Trex? And if so, maybe take a pause. For the coins that, interestingly enough, that I was able to move to other exchanges, I noticed that they've actually been working a little bit higher here. But the coins like music that are only on Trex, it's just a pain in the butt, and I'm probably going to take 100% loss on this thing. It is part of the venture capital space. I'm not going to sugarcoat this. I'm not going to run away from this. I'm going to take a loss on quite a few of these, and it's just part of the business. So, caveat emptor. I've been talking recently about this sort of notion that I really don't think that the Schult coin space is really going to find any serious bottom. Where the hell's the darn chart? Until we actually start seeing the W's come back in here, and we're just not there. So as a result, as long as I keep seeing this kind of news, this kind of activity, it casts a shadow across the entire space, and it makes our lives pretty challenging. And as long as this is going on, there may not be an altcoin season this summer. That's very possible. So it is part of the capitalist landscape. It is definitely a hallmark of venture capital investing. And if you want to do things like include in your trading plan that these coins have to be listed on multiple exchanges, or I can completely leave this exchange idea and I only trade coins that trade on decentralized exchanges, totally fine by me. And as an absolute worst case scenario, you can always just download the wallet and just keep the coins on your computer and maybe just wait. I have seen in the past, Trex goes and delists these, and then 6 months later, they relist them, and then all of a sudden the coin takes off again. I've seen it happen before. I'm not saying it's going to happen now, but the point here is that before you do put any new money into the market, always consider what your outs might be. And sometimes you might just have to take a punch in the nose thanks to this unregulated, highly, highly speculative space called the Schult coin space. All right, I think I'll leave the summary at that for today. All the best, and bye for now.